Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session on ASSA ABLOY Academy webinar on understanding delayed egress. We will be basing this on IBC requirements, but I do have a cross-reference table that illustrates NFPA 101 requirements as well. Today's session is being recorded and will be available for you within the next 24 hours on the ASSA ABLOY Academy website. Click on VILT, the virtual instructor-led training, and then on the top right-hand corner of the website will be links to the previously recorded sessions in case you missed some of it or in case you want to review any part of it. Additionally, within 24 hours, you will receive a thank you email, which you can use as proof of attendance for a supervisor or to self-report for continuing education credit. And let's get into today's session. There will be a question answer period at the end. The session is about 45 minutes. I reserve about 15 minutes for questions and answers. Please feel free to type your question in at any time. On the lower portion of your screen is a QA icon, and you can type your question in at any time, but I won't be answering questions until the end. And I don't know if I even said, my name is Katie Flower with ASSA ABLOY Academy. It's Monday morning, sorry guys. What we are going to cover today, delayed egress, before we can get into the actual requirements, the code requirements and the components and the use and application, I need to run through a few brief things on means of egress and occupancy types so that we understand the why. Why is delayed egress used in some occupancy types and not in others, and where do you find those requirements? This page has two great resources. The International Building Code has been adopted by every state in the United States in one version or another. From the 2006 edition to the 2018 edition, every state has adopted some version or another. Now, some states like California have adopted it and amended it and made it into its own California Building Code, but it is based on the IBC. The city of Chicago has a building code, but it's based for the most part on the IBC. They've changed the requirements for local requirements, and make sure that you know whatever your local amendments are, wherever your project may be. If you need to look up the version of the IBC that's in your area, the website www.iccsafe.org is an excellent resource. Type in the state and it will tell you all of the different codes that are applicable in your state. You may, if you have a large city, you may need to go to the city's website to see if they have a different version or an amended version. NFPA 101 is typically used for government work and healthcare. And there are some states like Louisiana that uses and has adopted NFPA 101 as part for its means of egress requirements. Codefinder.nfpa.org, you can look up your version of NFPA 101. Just be careful, because even though it's referenced by your project state, it may not be the whole book, or it may just be applicable to a certain type of occupancy or a certain type of project. As I mentioned before, IBC is more universal than NFPA 101. And when you have two different codes, if the two codes conflict, you'll go with the more restrictive requirements. And when I have more than one code, I like to build an Excel spreadsheet of the different code requirements so that I can see visually where the differences are and determine which one is more restrictive. I would highly recommend you use that process. The definition of means of egress is important for applying delayed egress, because in some cases you can only have one in any particular path of egress. The means of egress definition in the International Building Code is very similar to the one in NFPA 101. It is a continuous and unobstructed path of both vertical and horizontal egress travel from any occupied portion of a building or structure to a public way. And a public way is safety. Your means of egress consists of three separate, distinct parts: the exit access, the exit, and the exit discharge. The exit access is that portion of a means of egress that leads from any occupied portion of a building or structure to an exit. The area that's shaded in gray is all exit access. There are other related things to doors and hardware, but for the most part, the travel distance to exits, common path of travel, and all of that will be worked out on the life safety plan. The architect will already have that. What you need to be concerned with are exit access doorways. And if the exit access doorway is going to have delayed egress, then you need to be aware of the rest of your means of egress components. There are more exit access doors in a building than actual exit doors. And when we look at the definition of exit, a lot of people think of exit as a door. An exit can be a door. If it's on the level of exit discharge and leads to the outside, that is in fact an exit. But an exit by definition is so much more than that. It's that portion of a means of egress between the exit access and the exit discharge. Exit components do include exterior exit doors at the level of exit discharge, but they also include interior exit stairways and ramps, exit passageways, exterior exit stairways and ramps, and horizontal exits. The gray area is exit access. The white area is the exit. Once you cross through this door, this is a fire door assembly. Once you cross into the exit, you are now safe from fire and smoke for the remaining portion of your egress out of the building. There are stairwell reentry rules, which is a completely different topic, and it's a completely different ASSA ABLOY Academy webinar. But for the most part, you should be free from smoke and fire once you get to the vertical exit stair or once you cross through a horizontal exit. The exit discharge is that portion of a means of egress between the termination of an exit and public way or safety. And you have to be at least 10 feet away from the building in order to be considered past the exit discharge. Public way is deeded to the public, open air, parking lots, streets, sidewalks, as long as they're 10 feet or more away from the building. When we assign risk, we talk about how many exits are required based on occupant load and the square footage of the area and the occupancy type, how the building is actually used. If we treated every single building exactly the same, the cost to build buildings would be prohibitive. So a smaller building that has a small number of people is lower risk. And from 1 to 500 people, we need a minimum of 2 exits or exit access from any story or part of the building. From 501 people to 1,000, now we need a minimum of 3 exits, and more than 1,000, we need 4. And again, when we're selecting delayed egress and whether or not it is applicable, you have to look at your entire egress plan and where are your exits and your exit access doors that the delayed egress is from. The occupancy type is how the building is actually used. This is classified by the AHJ if there's any gray area, but the IBC in Chapter 3 has the different definitions. We're going to run through them fairly quickly. Assembly is Group A, business is Group B, educational Group E, high hazard is Group H, institutional is Group I, mercantile is Group M, and residential is Group R. We'll talk about each one of these individually. This does not include factory or storage or some of the very low occupancy types. These are the most common in construction that you'll be dealing with. An assembly occupancy is high risk. It's high risk because you're dealing with a lot of people, you're dealing with crowds of people, and the definition is when you have 50 or more people for the purposes of gathering together, such as civic, social, or religious functions. Also for recreation, food or drink consumption, or awaiting transportation. So the key benchmark is 50 or more people, but how it's used for these purposes: stadiums, movie theaters, dining halls, banquet rooms, concert halls, multi-purpose rooms, restaurants, any of these places that are over 50 people, you're gathering together for these purposes. They're considered Group A assembly. Nightclubs, conference rooms that are over 50 people, training rooms in any type of occupancy that are over 50 people would be assembly, courtrooms, and things like that. The reason that Group A is high risk, you're dealing with crowds of people that are not related by blood. You may bring a few friends or family members to a nightclub to enjoy listening to music, have some drinks, have a meal or whatever. But for the most part, if you've got 300, 500, 1,000 people in a nightclub and there's a fire, there's a lot of pushing and shoving and everybody's trying to reach the exits at the same time. And the leading cause of death in a fire is smoke. The second is panic. And panic means the pushing and the shoving, especially when people can't find the exits, they can't see them, maybe the lights go out or the thick black smoke covers up the lighted exit sign and it makes it very difficult. You're only familiar with the way that you came in, you're not as familiar with the side exits. And so your distance to the exits and how many people are in your way makes a big effect on how much you panic and how much you push and shove. If you use delayed egress on assembly, which you can't by code, but the reason why is you could have a non-fire emergency. The E2 nightclub in Chicago in 2003, just a couple of weeks before the Station nightclub in Rhode Island burned down, had a non-fire emergency. It was the second floor. Somebody was getting into a fight with another. The bouncers decided, security decided to spray pepper spray to try to mitigate the fight. And somebody smelled the pepper spray. They saw the tussle and they shouted out, "There's a terrorist, get out of here, they've got a gun." Even though that wasn't true, people couldn't see what was happening. They could smell the pepper spray and they started pushing and shoving and going down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, that door swung in the wrong direction and people crushed each other to death trying to open the door, trying to get out. And it was a non-fire emergency. But imagine if that were an outswinging door with delayed egress. The same situation would have happened. You're waiting 15 seconds at the door for that door to unlock. It's not a fire emergency. So people are pushing and shoving and trampling each other in that period of time. And a lot can happen in 15 seconds. So this is the why behind assembly being high risk and not allowing delayed egress. Group B business is ordinary risk, ordinary hazard. It is your office buildings. It's any type of building or portion of a building that's used for professional or service type transactions, which includes outpatient clinics, colleges and university buildings, professional service office buildings, barbershops, beauty shops, and things like that. And so very common you will see delayed egress used in business occupancy because it is ordinary risk. Educational Group E is 6 or more people through the 12th grade. So you're dealing with young school-age children all the way from some daycare, nursery school, all the way through 12th grade. And even though they do fire drills, educational occupancies are higher risk right up there with assembly because you're dealing with school-age children who tend to panic if there is a fire. And again, delayed egress for the most part is not permitted in educational occupancies. You think about our climate nowadays, and if you've got delayed egress on any of your exterior doors that are side doors, and let's say an active shooter is coming down the hallway and people are trying to get out of the building, now you've got a 15-second delay and a trap. So there's a lot of reasons why the higher risk occupancies are not permitted to use delayed egress. And you've really got to look at the why before you determine the appropriate hardware for a building or space. Institutional is I1, it's broken into 4 parts. I1 is assisted living facilities. I2 are your healthcare facilities, including nursing homes and hospitals. I3, detention facilities, including adult and juvenile delinquent centers. and correctional facilities. I-4 is your adult or child daycare, where it's 24-hour supervised care. All of these occupancies share in common. Staff will help evacuate patients or inmates if there is a fire, and chances are they're not going to evacuate them out of the building. They will evacuate them to an area of refuge inside the building that is safe, or into an outside courtyard in the case of a detention facility where they still can't roam free, but they are safe from the fire. And the people in institutional Group I occupancies are not capable of self-preservation, either because they just had surgery or they're being detained for something that they've done. So locking doors in institutional occupancies is quite frequent, and locking the door from the egress side, either by using delayed egress or some other method, is typically permitted. Group M, Mercantile, is very similar to Group B, Business, but instead of selling services, you're selling goods and merchandise. So department stores, drugstores, sales rooms, very, very similar to a Group B business occupancy. And ordinary hazard, ordinary risk, and therefore Group M, Mercantile, can use delayed egress on the side doors. You think about stores, you don't want somebody stealing something and going out the side exit door. The exit door is there in case of a fire, but you don't want somebody just running out that side door with merchandise. Residential Group R is also broken into 4 categories. R1 is primarily transit, like hotels. R2, permanent living facilities with more than 2 units, apartment buildings, for example. R3 is not classified as R1 or R2, but it is permanent, like boarding houses. And R4 are assisted living facilities that are supervised, but the patients are capable of self-preservation, meaning they can get up out of bed at any time of the night and exit the building if there is a fire or other emergency. Residential occupancies are ordinary hazard, ordinary risk, and we can use delayed egress on residential occupancies. High hazard is storage rooms and other types of rooms that include manufacturing, processing, or generation of materials that constitute a physical or health hazard, materials that are highly flammable or that could explode on any given contact. And so it is among the highest risk. Delayed egress is not permitted on a high hazard occupancy. And then the fun part, you have mixed occupancy, where you've got more than one within a building that share the building. There's 2 ways to look at mixed occupancy. If the two or more different occupancy types share means of egress components, then you have to go, your hardware needs to be selected based on the more restrictive requirements. For example, if you've got a college building, that's business, Group B. But if you've got an auditorium that can hold 300 people, that's Group A, assembly. If they intermingle and share the same egress components, corridors, doors, stairs, etc., then delayed egress is not permitted because assembly would overrule the business. If you have 2 or more occupancies and they have separate egress components, or they're separated with fire barriers and have their own separate paths of egress out of the building, then you treat each occupancy type individually. So you may have a hotel and then a conference center. The conference center has its own exit components and would be assembly. The hotel itself would be R1 residential, and you would treat them individually for your requirements. The code requires, unless specifically permitted, free egress with 1 motion, and delayed egress falls under the category of special locking arrangements. It is locking the door from the egress side. It does have special knowledge or special effort. So out of the box, delayed egress needs to be permitted by your occupancy type and based on the number of people that are there. What is delayed egress? The picture illustrates a very common code compliant delayed egress opening. You don't have to have exit devices, but in this case, there's exit devices with mullions, a built-in, this is the Securitron IMXDA, fully self-contained delayed egress. The card reader on the wall will unlock momentarily to allow someone to exit without setting off the alarm. There is a sign posted on the door. And so where is delayed egress and what are the requirements? Where is delayed egress allowed? Delayed egress, this is from IBC 2015. Other editions, very, very similar. But please make sure that you look for any local amendments. Some places, for example, will not allow you to use a maglock as part of a delayed egress component. Then you have to use the exit device, the built-in exit device. But based on IBC 2015, this is the reference. I will have a cross-reference chart in a moment with the different versions so that you can see how much has changed. Delayed egress locking systems shall be permitted to be installed on doors serving any occupancy except for Group A, assembly, E, educational, and H, high hazard. As I mentioned previously, these are the three highest risk. They each have their own reasons why delayed egress is not permitted. And by and large, it's because of the propensity to panic. So when you have a building that's equipped with automatic sprinkler system or an approved automatic smoke or heat detection system, the locking system shall be installed and operated in accordance with all of the following. There are 8 criteria. You cannot mix and match. You can't mix and match between this and access controlled egress or any of the other special locking arrangements. Please make sure that you follow all of the criteria that is set forth in your code. Number 1, the delay electronics shall deactivate on actuation of the automatic sprinkler system or automatic fire detection system, allowing immediate free egress. What is actuation of the system? Actuation of the system means water moving through the pipes of the sprinkler system or smoke actually being detected by the smoke detection system or fire that has been picked up by your fire detection system. But the manual pull station is not actuation of any of this. Manual pull stations, by and large, will not unlock delayed egress. It has to be actuation of the system. Number 2, delay electronics of the delayed egress locking system shall deactivate upon loss of power controlling the lock or lock mechanism, allowing immediate free egress. This means that whatever device that you use has to be fail-safe. Fail-safe means that on loss of power, there is no locking. And that is very common among all the different delayed egress that are offered from all different manufacturers. 3, the delayed egress locking system shall have the capability of being deactivated at the Fire Command Center and other approved locations. Other approved locations may be a nurse's station or some kind of a reception desk or something like that. But because it's electric, your switch can be located anywhere within the building, and that's all this is just a switch or multiple switches that will deactivate the delayed egress locking system. Number 4, an attempt to egress shall initiate an irreversible process that shall allow such egress in not more than 15 seconds when a physical effort to exit is applied to the egress side of the door hardware for not more than 3 seconds. That's the nuisance delay. If you're in a nursing home and a 5-year-old is visiting their grandma or grandpa and they can't read the sign and they start pushing on the door, mom can still grab them and pull them away without setting off the alarm as long as they do that within that nuisance delay. But once you have initiated the irreversible process, there's an audible sound, a very loud alarm in the vicinity of the door. Once the delay electronics have been deactivated, rearming the delay electronics shall be by manual means only, which means somebody has to visit the door and find out why was the alarm set in the first place make sure everything is fine before they reset it. Most delayed egress will have a key switch built in or built into the exit device if it's one of those self-contained in the exit device, but you can also use a card reader or a key switch on the wall if you need to. And by exception, where approved by the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, a delay of not more than 30 seconds is permitted on a delayed egress door. From my experience and what I have found, you're only going to get that exception if we're talking about behavioral health or detention or some other reason. It's not going to be a side door of a business because of the length of distance it will take security to get to that opening. That's not a good enough reason. It's got to be usually for the patient's detention or restraint that they will allow the 30 seconds instead of 15. Number 5, the egress path from any point shall not pass through more than one delayed egress locking system. If I'm doing a project and they want delayed egress on this double egress door and they want delayed egress on this stair door, that's more than one in a path of egress, and therefore it would not be allowed unless it meets this exception, which is I2 occupancies, nursing homes and hospitals, or I3 occupancies, which are your detention and correctional facilities. The egress path from any point in the building shall pass through not more than 2 delayed egress locking systems, provided that the combined delay does not exceed 30 seconds. So this is a hospital, and I could have delayed egress here and delayed egress here, each one 15 seconds, no more than a total of 30 seconds combined. That's why it's very important to understand your occupancy types and your path of egress. Additionally, number 6, a sign is provided on the door. It shall be located within 12 inches of your door exit hardware. Push until alarm sounds. Door can be opened in 15, or if it meets the exception, 30 seconds. And for doors where the delayed egress is on the pull side, pull until alarm sounds is what the sign would read. And the sign characteristics need to meet the visual requirements of ICC ANSI A117.1, which is your ADA standard. 7, emergency lighting shall be provided on the egress side of the door. And 8, the delayed egress locking system unit shall be listed in accordance with UL 294. And you can check your listings for each of your products. ANSI UL 294 is a listing that you will find on those products. Where are delayed egress devices most commonly used? If you have a side or back door of a business, it's an exit door, but you don't want somebody taking a $2,000 laptop or whatever items that may be on somebody's desk. You don't want them running out the side door with expensive equipment or materials. The side or back door of a store, which is a mercantile occupancy. Again, you don't want somebody leaving with expensive goods. The side or back door of a college building that doesn't have any mixed in assembly. Doors in hospitals to restrict public access. There are other ways in hospitals to restrict patients, but if you have an area that needs to restrict public access, you will commonly find delayed egress as the component. There's 2 basic types of locking hardware. You can have the electromag lock, everything built into the mag lock as one unit, or you can have a delayed egress exit device with everything built in. And your accessory components, you could have a key switch for manual reset if there isn't one built in, but typically they will be. And depending on the type of mag lock, you may need a touch sense bar to initiate the delay process. Always look at the manufacturer's catalog to find out all the components that you will need. Here's the first cross-reference chart. I compare the different occupancy types and the requirements. If you want, take a picture of this screen. It is a great resource and reference. But Group A assembly, for example, from IBC 2006 to 2018, it is not permitted. In NFPA 101 from 2006 to 2015, it is permitted with exceptions. In NFPA 101, they have chapters for each of the different occupancy types. In IBC, they tell you right in the paragraph which occupancy types you can and can't use it. So IBC is a little more user-friendly. And since you have to, if you've got more than one code that is being used on a building, the more restrictive one would apply. And since IBC does not allow Group A to have delayed egress, you would have to get a written variance if you wanted to use it from the AHJ. Group B, business, delayed egress is used across the board in every single code. In Group E, educational, it's not permitted in IBC until you get to 2018. And now they do permit it on classrooms that are less than 50 on the secondary exit from that classroom. You can use it in NFPA 101, but again, if you're dealing with two different codes, the more restrictive would apply, which means that you can't use in Group E educational. High hazard, regardless, across the board, it is not permitted. Group I1 assisted living, it is permitted everywhere across the board. I mean, not everywhere, you can only use one within the path of egress. You still have to meet the requirements, but yes, it's permitted. It's permitted in I2, I3, I4, Group M mercantile, and Group R residential. The next cross-reference is the different requirements, those 8 criteria. So is sprinkler detection system release required? Yes, across the board. Unlock on loss of power, fail-safe? Yes, across the board. Signal from fire command center? Yes. So you can see that there are some differences in NFPA 101 when it comes to emergency lighting at the door, no more than one before entering an exit. That varies by occupancy type in NFPA 101, whereas in IBC, it varies by exception in the 2015 and 2018 edition. UL 294 is relatively new. It was started to be required in IBC 2015 and beyond. And again, if you want to take a picture of this slide to use it as a cross-reference, these are the kinds of things that I'll do. I used to be a specification consultant. For 11 years, I wrote specifications, and it's important if I'm doing projects in many different states to understand and recognize what that city, what that state does or doesn't allow for delayed egress and locking hardware. Now let's take a look through a few examples, and we'll talk through what the owner wants, what is a code compliant solution, and how can we do it. We have a casino, which is a Group A assembly, but this is the back of house, the office area. The office area is considered Group B business, and it is completely separated from the casino itself. The casino has its own exits. So mixed occupancy, I will look at these and treat these completely separate. Group B business for this office area. The owner, because it's close proximity to the cash counting room, the owner wants a valid credential to enter or exit this door. They don't want somebody taking the cash from the cash counting room and bolting out this door. The only real solution that is code compliant is delayed egress. By putting delayed egress on this pair of doors, I can use a card reader for valid people. They can get out, and they can also get in using the card reader. But anybody else, if they're trying to bolt with $20,000, $200,000 worth of cash, as soon as they get to this exit, they'll set off an alarm, and waiting 15 seconds with $200,000 cash in your hands as you're trying to exit a casino is probably not a smart idea, as I'm sure that there are security personnel right around the corner. Another example, we have a department store, the back exit of a department store. Think about it for a second. What type of occupancy does a department store fall under? And the owner wants to lock this door. It's just an exit only door. There's no entry from the outside. It's hollow metal flush doors. They want to lock these doors so that shoppers won't go running out the back door with goods. It would be a Group M mercantile, and delayed egress is permitted on Group M occupancies. I've got no problem specifying delayed egress on this pair of doors. The next example is a one-story office building. And what type of occupancy is an office building? It is Group B business. The owner wants card access from this side of door 125 going into this open office area. You have to have a valid credential to get into this open office area. And there's 70 occupants on this side. Let's take a look at the full floor plan. I've got 70 total occupants on this side. And from any building or space, it's a one-story office building. Anytime you have from 1 to 500 people, you need a minimum of 2 exits from the building. The doors in purple are my exits. I've got 1 here and 1 here. So the 70 occupants on this side of the building, my 2 choices for exits at the time of fire would be here and here. That means that door 125 is in my egress path from this side of the building. I can't get to this exit without passing through this door. And you will commonly see this. This is a real live project that happened several years back. And I had a specification consultant reach out to me and say, how do I lock this door? Because technically this side of the door is the egress side. This side of the door is not the egress side, because from this side, you can exit through here to get to there, or you can exit out of here. But from this side, this is the egress side. Now, why is this still business? I've got 70 total occupants on this side. It's over 50 people. Why is this not Group A assembly? It's business because each of these small rooms do not add up to 50 individually. And so unless I have a large conference room where I've got 50 or more people, or unless I've got a big meeting space or dining area, all of these are very small. So these are business occupancy, and the 70 occupants will reach the exits at a different time. It's not the same as if you have a bunch of people at a nightclub and everybody's reaching the exits at the same time. So there's 2 parts to being Group A assembly. This does not qualify. Just because you have more than 50 people does not automatically make it assembly occupancy. It's how it's used. But that means that, yes, I can use delayed egress. Because it's Group B business, I can put delayed egress on this door with a card reader on this side. So I'm restricting access to the open office during normal times. If somebody tries to come through without the card reader, then they will set off the alarm. That is a pain. That's not the greatest thing in the world for this small business. But for the way that it's drawn, that's the only solution that will do what the owner wants. If there is a fire, this is unlocked immediately for free egress to door 103. The best solution would be for the owner to add another exit door from this side of the building over off of this hallway to the outside. And then this is no longer an exit access door. Then you could lock it with any solution. But sometimes an architect will have a drawing and your exit access through the door leads to another exit and is a required means of egress. You see it in office buildings all the time, going from an elevator lobby to reach the stairs. You've got to pass through somebody else's tenant suite. Always take a look at your full path of egress when determining the hardware. One more example, this is a 2-story nursing home with full automatic sprinkler system. What type of occupancy is a nursing home? That falls under I2, nursing homes and hospitals, or I2, institutional. The owner wants to lock 3 doors with card readers in the dementia wing to prevent patients from wandering out. This door, and let's take a look at the full floor plan, and this door. We have 3 different paths of egress, this way, and this way. And so I2 occupancies do allow either controlled egress, which we didn't discuss, that's a different special locking arrangement, or delayed egress. And so when I have the choice between these two, I'm going to go with controlled egress 100% of the time because there is no alarm and it locks the door for a longer period of time. But if you need to, you can use delayed egress as a viable solution because anybody in this suite, this is one exit or exit access door, this is another exit, and this is another exit. They're completely separate from each other, and you don't have more than one within a path of egress. Coming into this space, you're not controlling egress or having delayed egress getting in from this direction. You would only have it on the one leaf exiting this suite. That brings us to our question and answer period. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in at this point. My email address is on the screen. If you have any project-specific code questions that you would like to ask, I may ask you to send me a PDF of the floor plan, or I may ask you for more information. Please be ready with what code version is in force in your project area, but I'd be happy to take a look at code questions that you may have. I don't see any questions right now at this time, and if there aren't any questions, that's fine. This session has been recorded for you to review as many times as you would like on ASA Abloy Academy. VILT, just click on the top right-hand corner. And the question, are you an AHC? I am an AHC, a CDC, and an EHC. So technically I'm an AOC, Architectural Openings Consultant. There's only, I think there's still less than 15 AOCs in the whole world. Another question, is a pull station at the door meet the requirement for a switch? No. The switch has to be something that you reset manually. A pull station is more if you're trying to set off the fire alarm system that does not connect to the delayed egress. And unless we have any further questions, I again thank you for your attendance. Look forward to seeing you again at another ASA Abloy webinar in the near future.